Good afternoon. Let's get started. My name is Ricardo Hausman. I'm the director of the Center for International Development at Harvard University. And it's a pleasure for me to be here moderating this panel on Latin America's demographic dividend and the opportunities to invest in our people, which is our greatest asset. Latin America is benefiting from the demographic bonus. That means that fertility rates have declined precipitously over the last 20 years, which means that the rate of growth of the working age population today is significantly higher than the rate of growth of the total population. That means that there's more people of working age relative to children. And that means that out of the labor force, there are more people of working age, and that out of the total population, there's more people of working age. And because there are fewer children, there's also much higher female labor force participation. So that means that there are potentially many, many more people working and fewer children. That means more work per capita, but it also means the capacity to invest more in the children, because now we have two parents earning salaries to support fewer children, and consequently better able to invest in the education of their children. And what's true at the family level, it's true at the national level, there are more taxpayers per student. So we can invest more in the education of our students. Now, the truth is that this has been true for over 2 decades. And we have benefited from that demographic bonus in whatever measure we have. Okay, I'm not going to qualify whether we've done great or not in the last 2 decades, but it is what it is. It's not a new phenomenon, but it's a phenomenon that will only be here for maybe 2 more decades. And after that, we will get older and things will get much, much harder. But there is a fundamental puzzle in Latin America that I would like to illustrate by comparing Brazil in today with the UK in 1960. Okay, Brazil today is more urbanized than the UK in 1960. Brazil today has a labor force with more years of schooling, 7.2, relative to the UK in 1960, which had only 6 years of schooling on average. Brazil today has more university graduates, more than twice, 2.5 times more university graduates as a share of the total labor force than did the UK in 1960. So it's significantly more professionals. 5.7% of the labor force in Brazil are people with university education. And Brazil today can operate with a technology that is 50 years more advanced than the technology of the UK in 1960. So Brazil should be doing marvelously. And today, GDP in Brazil, GDP per capita, income per capita in the UK in 1960 was 140% higher than it is in Brazil today. So with more urbanization, more education, more university graduates, and 50 years more technology, the UK was able to achieve 140% more of income than Brazil is able to achieve today. So that is an important, and this is not about Brazil, because I can do the same calculations with Mexico or Argentina. It's a general phenomenon. It's a big puzzle. Why is it that we have invested in all of these things? We have gone through all these transformations, and we don't see the effects in terms of productivity per worker or income per capita. In fact, at the global level, in 1960, the countries that had 6 years of schooling of their labor force had an average income per capita of $10,000. Today, the countries that have 6 years of schooling of their labor force have an average income per capita of $1,000. So everybody has become more educated, people are not getting richer. So that's the puzzle we have in front of us. What it is that allows countries to progress, to make their people more productive, and what is the relationship of that to things we're doing which might or might not involve schooling. So to help us understand these issues and to set the stage, it is my very honor to present to you President Laura Chinchilla, who's the president of a country that is highly admired by all of Latin America and the rest of the world, because they have seemed to be doing things marvelously well in a context where it is very easy to mess things up. So without further ado, President Chinchilla.
Muy buenas tardes, muchas gracias.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Ricardo, for that generous introduction. In reality, in talking about the panel, I have no doubts that we will find, many of us will find the answer to the dilemmas that Ricardo has introduced to us. And I don't really want but just few key words about the big topics that we have to answer in our region, that it will ask a question, that is how Latin America could get the best of their demographic bonus. Obviously, a lot has to do with experience, Costa Rica, for example, and also with some of the challenges that we have, that we still have to solve. We have 5 minutes only, and I have to summarize this. Without a doubt, Latin America, as I always said, it is a very rich continent, and in certain is in natural resources, productivity, and the land, the climate is very favorable. But when I am talking about the richness of Latin America, I am talking about that it's a continent of young people, and there is no more wealth than precisely the human capital. We have the possibility to lose that wealth, and we would never be able to replace it. We would never, if we don't invest in the human capital, and we forget about it, and that great potential of young people is lost. That doesn't mean that results are going to be neutral, but it's going to be, we will get behind in our development and unemployment, poverty, violence, that it has been part of the drama of Latin America, that it is one of the worst in the world, and all this is contemplated in the lack of opportunities of younger people that are part of the criminal problems of our region. And the other option is to decide to do something with that wealth that we have, that is our younger people. And there is where the challenges are of how to invest in that human capital, that without a doubt, it has a great potential in Latin America to grow and to develop. And beyond that, beyond the political issues that has to do with the generation of human capital, and that's the key word is education. We have to recognize that we have had improvement in these areas, particularly in education, and to help our kids not to leave the schools, at the investment. Thank you to programs as transference, and that the children would stay at school. And we also see more determination in Latin America to invest in education. In Costa Rica's case, it's a very good example. We have reached 7.2% of the GDP in public education. That's not enough, and that's what Ricardo was talking about. If we are investing more, why the results are not the best, and why we are not generating the wealth that we should be finding. In our case, for example, there are 2 important issues to take care of. One is how this education, and it's not enough to say how many kids are graduating, and it is also from what areas are graduating children. And there is where the discussion is how to make give incentive to the children in certain areas where Latin America has great challenges to improve the productivity of the economies and innovation. That is a negotiation and a discussion with universities, but also we can do something if we can introduce reforms from the high school education, implementing more better effective methods and through math, through learning the Spanish language, how to improve, how to make it more attractive, the sciences, for example, how to implement the curriculum, the academic curriculum, to introduce the technical formation of the learning of the third diversified cycle. So if we are making those changes from the high school, what we're going to get as a goal is a new generation of younger people that it would go to the universities to reformat their offer. And we have students from the university that they would continue offering careers that they are not according to the development that Latin America is looking for. The second point is the quality of that education. And I do not have any doubts that Latin America, if it doesn't decide to graduate the best ones, we are in a position that the education in Latin America is not the best one. 8 or 7 nations that we have been evaluated in the PISA approvals, we have found that those are the things that we have to maintain. And when we see those qualifications in areas like math, reading, sciences, all those topics where in reality we make the difference, we are within the worst 20 countries. We are behind 5 years in schooling when we compare ourselves with the education in Shanghai, for example, 2 years behind. 2 years when we see the average in OECD countries, and we have to look for mechanisms of evaluation that can tell the government and to tell the populations if we are improving or not, and to end beyond the challenges that we have in education as more to invest more, and when we talk about more quality, we would like to talk as a positive issue, that revolution that we can do, introducing digital technologies in order to improve the education, such as the connectivity, the infrastructure, the quality of internet. It is also the content, and the digital revolution can allow us, the countries, to be closer, faster, and to reach the development that we would like to get. And to finish, as I was saying, basically, we have also 2 challenges post-education, and one is to retain the professionals. That has a lot to do with the labor market and with the formation, where also we can introduce the topic as in a way that the graduates not only would have the possibilities to find employments, but also to generate through systems of innovation and businesses to improve the productivity. So all those resources that we have invested, we come back as a wealth to our countries.
So we heard relevance, quality of education, retention of talent, very important messages. Thank you, Mrs. President. Now we'll move to our panel. I'll present each one of them as we go along. I'll start with Mónica Flores. Mónica Flores is the Regional Managing Director for Latin America of the ManpowerGroup, based in Mexico. And the ManpowerGroup is very well known for the fact that it does surveys about manpower needs, and it helps companies sorts their manpower needs. So in some sense, it's an excellent observatory of the problem we are addressing. The skills gaps, the skills needs, the ability of corporations to find the talent that they need. So why don't you share with us what you've learned through your surveys about the nature of the skills problem in Latin America?
Ok, gracias. En ManpowerGroup sí atendemos a los clientes buscando.
We do look for talent for the organizations. This experience gives us from the first hand the needs, the abilities or competencies that the clients require from different sectors in all of the regions and different size companies or enterprises. Every year we carry out a survey to look for talent. We define talent as the person that knows how to do something, that can do something, and wants to do something. We call this people, of course, but not with the adjective talent. Now, seeking for talent, that is those that can and want to, considering also this difficulty where we have thousands of vacancies per month where we don't cover with the sufficient speed that we want to these vacancies, we conducted this survey. And we asked 60,000 decision makers in Latin America. 25,000 of them were from Latin America, and we asked if they had difficulties. For example, Brazil, 68% said that they do have problems to fill in their vacancies, and then Argentina with 41%, Costa Rica with 40%, Mexico and Panama 38%, Guatemala 30%, and Peru 28%. If we compare this with the hiring expectations, where we have a different survey, it's actually the exact opposite. The higher the difficulty for covering vacancies, there is less hiring expectancy. And so what we have is perfectly clear, a lack of balance between offer and demand. In some forums, for example, they say that's false because there's a lot of talent available. No, what we have is a lot of people trying to find a job, but those people do not have the skills and competencies that the world requires. And so that's the challenge. How do we tie these together? And it doesn't just have to do with a university degree. Every time, it's less important for recruiters if you have 2 PhDs or if you graduated with honors or the name of your school. What matters today is for you to have the required competencies to be able to sing into the rhythm of technology, as Madam President mentioned, or the rhythm of the enterprise that is in a very competitive world that has to respond to its customers quicker and be innovative, and in the end, create revenues in the case of the private sector. Thank you very much. And thank you for managing time appropriately. Secondly,
Milei. Javier is the chief economist of Corporacion America. Corporacion America is an organization that builds and manages a bunch of airports throughout Latin America and the world, and is engaged in building this important railway tunnel between Argentina and Chile, and is a very significant organization that manages extremely complex things for which they need a lot of talent, a lot of people who are able to perform the complex services that that company needs. Javier is also an academic, a researcher with over 50 papers published, and so I would like for you to share your thoughts as to what are the skills gaps or what are the difficulties that you face in terms of the potential for growing your firm or the rest of the society? Where are the skill shortages?
in general, when one talks about the Argentinian case, what one finds is that there are very capable people that when they go out of the country are very successful, but however, locally speaking, they might fail. And so there are some issues. For example, the first one has to do with the role of public education. For example, when one sees the result, you find that every time the formation or the training from the private sector is most important. For example, the first myth that needs to be corrected is for the public sector to say that's not true, that's false. For example, the private sector in education generates what the market demands. However, the public sector, as its sustainability and results do not depend on how successful they are in the placing of professionals in the market. They dedicate to the formation of professionals that live outside of the scheme of reality. A good example, for instance, in the case of Argentina, we can say it's of our Minister of Economy. We have an economist who has graduated with honors, with all of the honors, but with a Marxist profile. And 4 years ago, the economy has not launched out with the best performances in its history or with the best exchange history. An economy that has to have been growing at 7, 8, or 9% is currently debating on if it's not or if it is in crisis. So depending on the needs of the market and what the market dictates, well, clearly it's satisfied by the private sector. And so there is an issue of how the system generates the signals and how it internalizes it and produces what the market wants. And so I think that it's an interesting point, especially, Ricardo, when you were talking about the case in Brazil and the comparison with what England was and its equivalent. We have to consider if the education that we are generating is an education of quality, because you can have many years of schooling and nonetheless you don't have good output. Why? Because the trainers are not good. And you also have to consider the assessment of who the trainers are, because you can generate a great university full of Marxists, and when you prepare a Minister of Economy, then it's going to have a different impact to the economy in the country. And in my country, that happens in different levels.
Of the labor force, it's the skills of the policymakers. That's where we're having trouble in Argentina. So thank you very much. Now let's move to Humberto Luis Ribeiro, who's the Secretary of the Ministry of Commerce and Services of Brazil. Let me ask you, Brazil has made enormous efforts over the last 20 years in trying to improve its educational system, starting from a very low base. But Brazil has been much more exemplary in terms of labor training, and it has very, very sophisticated labor training institutions that fall under your mandate. How is the system of labor training able to generate or not the kinds of skills that the economy is demanding, that the economy is needing, and to what extent it can compensate or complement whatever is done with the educational system?
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, everyone. First of all, let me come to the point comparing England and Brazil, which also refers to all other countries in the world. I think we're living on a running belt right now in terms of competitiveness. So by doing the same thing you did yesterday is not enough to keep your status quo today. So that creates for us a sense of urgency, but also, in case of Presidenta Dilma in Brazil, a sense of ambition. And in that sense, I would like to talk a little bit on how we're doing that regarding labor skills, but also some other initiatives. But coming to one point, which was very remarkable to myself in my personal life, when I was like a teenager. I come from a family of farmers in the Midwest part of Brazil. And I saw my grandfather and my uncle having a discussion regarding one of the employees at the farm that he did not want to engage in all kinds of work, all kinds of tasks at the farm because he was already trained on bovine fertility. So he could not take the risk of scratching or hurting his hands because of that. He was like a lab worker. And the decision both of them took at that time was to train all the employees from the farm. So it was like 45 to 50 people being trained. Today, 3 of them are veterinarians. So they went all the way up to a graduate level. And even one of them is providing services to Africa today on that expertise. This is like 30 years ago, so we saw the revolution of productivity in Brazilian protein, not only in cattle, in beef, but also soybeans and other sources of protein. But this was just to refer that specific thing in my personal experience, and I'm sure everybody has many other cases similar to this, provided me that, the faith on education, on how can education transform not only the region, not only the supply chain, but also the life of each specific individual. So this is how we believe that we should have the provision of opportunity to everybody and share the results based on the merit of each individual. So that are some of the pillars in our, the values that we're employed today in our day-to-day activities. Brazilian government has decided to tackle the challenges of labor skills together with the private sector of the country. And that is embedded, that is one of the pillars of the Plano Brasil Maior, where myself, I'm in charge of one of the blocks of the Plano Brasil Maior, where we have direct relationship with 67 national associations, so representing businesses and also labor forces, associações laborais, so they represent the employees also. And together with them, and of course the Ministry of Education and Science and Technology of Brazil, we're providing different opportunities coming from the basic technical skills training, which is called the Pronatec program, where we ramped up from 1.3 million people being trained per year in Brazil. We reached now more than 3 million people already being trained. And specifically on resources provided with the new program, we have reached 5.6 million people inside the Plano Brasil Maior, trained in the last 3 years. So this means that people trained directly under the requirements of the competitiveness of our private sector. So we must reach 8 million people. That's our goal for this year. We have a problem with retention even with that, because employment rate is very low in Brazil, and I mean, business must be doing a good job, but they're even hiring people before they finish the program. So right now we are even worried. I mean, it was too successful, I would say, in that sense, because even before finishing the program, companies are already hiring the students. But not to stop on the technical skills. President Dilma also addressed one key point for us in the strategy of the country, which is the relationship with very high-level skilled professionals, mostly on the technical layer, IT, engineering, and the new economy, let's say, profiles, but also the integration of the country to other cultures, other nations. So our president designed the Ciências Sem Fronteiras, Science Without Borders program. Harvard University is also part of that program. We're very happy to that. But many others, 40 countries. I'd like also to thank Presidenta Chinchilla. Costa Rica is one of our great partners on that program also, hosting Brazilian students that can visit, develop their postgraduate studies in foreign countries, and then come back, not only with the skills, the hard skills, but also, of course, with all the cultural and the friendship developed in a few years spent abroad. So in that sense, it's a little bit of the programs in place. Brazil, total numbers in education. On primary level, educação básica in Brazil is around 50 million people enrolled today. And in graduate level studies, educação superior, we have around 8 million people, both public and private sector providing the education. But one point I would like to mention to close this initial remarks, which is related also to the burden and the taxation on labor. This was a key issue for us when we started the Brasil Maior program, and this was addressed with a labor, I would say, a tax reduction. In fact, it was a change in the way that we taxate labor force in Brazil. So we have changed it from 48 different industries, different sectors in Brazil, different supply chains in the country. We have changed the taxation from payroll to revenues. So mostly those that are labor-intensive segments. So this would, before, prevent entrepreneurs from hiring more people. Now, I mean, that is not an issue anymore. If they need people, they will not think about what is the tax burden on that. They will bring in the talent. If their revenues are not growing, they will pay the same amount of tax on those supply chains. I mean, this is just to provide an overview of what's happening together with us.
Thank you very much. Peter Beshar is the Executive Vice President and General Counsel of MMC. MMC is a corporation that owns several of the most important companies that help large corporations manage their labor force. Among them, Mercer, which helps them find talent, manage pensions, manage health, and so on. We have talked a little bit about education. We've talked a little bit about labor training and other things. But I would like to ask you about another aspect of managing human capital, which is the issue of health and well-being. Is this something that companies should do because of corporate social responsibility, or is there a business case for worrying and managing healthcare issues?
Gracias, Rica.
Thank you, Ricardo, and good evening to all.
Couple of metaphors to just speak about the demographic profile of Latin America. First, a Christmas tree. Second, a lollipop. And then third, a pear. You're wondering how I can possibly bring these three concepts together. The traditional view about demographic profiles was that the best was really a Christmas tree at the outset, that you had the greatest number of people, the greatest number of workers throughout the society supporting a relatively small band of older individuals at the top. And what's happened, as many folks know, in the United States, in Western Europe, and interestingly in countries like China, is that Christmas tree is becoming more like a lollipop, where there are many more older workers and a much smaller base of younger workers to support that. When Ricardo spoke about the demographic dividend that exists in Latin America, it's really because the Christmas tree has become something of a pear, where with declining birth rates at the base, you have fewer younger people, children essentially, and then a relatively smaller group of senior citizens at the top. And really the vast bulk of the population are in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and your 50s. So that is an incredible opportunity for Latin America. The median age in Latin America is 34. By contrast, in the US and Western Europe, it's a good bit over 40. So that's the opportunity. And the question is, what does the region do with that opportunity? The other speakers have been quite eloquent in talking about the importance of education, obviously experience, to address the skills gap. And our company, Mercer, which is really in the talent business, I'm delighted that we have some of our colleagues here from Mercer, They've done extensive research together with the World Economic Forum, and it's in the fairly fat book that is on a number of your seats. And one of the main takeaways was that those countries, like Costa Rica, and companies that focus on health and wellness, together with these other elements that are critical, are actually the ones that are thriving, and that they're not simply reducing their healthcare costs, an important component to free up funds to put into education and some of the programs that Humberto spoke about, but it's also tangible progress in improving your productivity, so that if your workers have more energy, they have greater concentration, they have greater resilience when lousy things happen, these are the ones that are really able to seize the great benefits of this demographic dividend.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to respond a little bit to some of your comments. So I'll start with Monica. Monica, President Chinchilla said that one of the problems with our educational system is that we are training people in activities that are not very relevant, not very pertinent. Now, you have information about what are the positions that companies have trouble filling. And I'm sure that me as a parent, and many parents in the audience would like to know what to tell their children about what are the skills that are in great demand that companies are having trouble with. Where should they focus their attention if we want to have education that is pertinent? What are the jobs that are hard to fill?
Déjame contestar la pregunta en dos.
Let me answer the question in two parts. We have to promote certain careers or studies and incentivize others. But we have to develop competencies like autonomy, teamwork, and different skills that all of the people here present know about, because these are the ones that are going to allow you to relearn and to unlearn so that you're at the rhythm of the day-to-day world and technology. Even if you study nowadays the degree that is most demanding and what is most convenient to you, it's going to be obsolete in 2 years. So you have to keep yourself abreast and learn throughout your entire life, and also unlearn. But also it has to do with the parents' culture, because we have been educated, especially in Latin America, to think that a university degree is what you have to do. And that university degree is going to be hanging in the living room, and the lawyer, for example, in the informal economy is going to be frustrated and looking for other things to do because they can't find a good position. Now, to calm this, I wonder what the people here present says that your daughter is going to study nursing, or when your son says he's going to study plumbing. When your son says, I don't want a degree, I want to have a specialized technical degree, I don't want a bachelor degree. For some of us, it would be difficult to support our children in these decisions, but it's the most accurate, because in the positions that are more difficult to cover, according to the survey that we have, which are 10 different ones, it varies per country in Latin America, but they're the same 10, first, second, third place, but they're always the same 10. The most difficult ones to cover is the technical areas. The second is sales representative, speaking about even beauty products all the way to financial services. But in our culture, sales is something that I do in the meantime as I find a significant job. And sales is not something that you're taught in a specific school. The third point is engineering. And nowadays in Mexico, we produce more engineers than ever before. But they don't speak English, they don't know how to work in teams, and they don't know how to solve social problems. And so as we are able to remove that myth that we have to have a university bachelor degree, and we're able to promote the study of technical degrees, and to have a value of educational institutions, not by the number of students that they have, but the number of formal employees that they're graduates have, and also how much money do your alumni make, or in what field of science or world sphere are they in? Are they in a formal economy or an informal economy? Because in the end, this issue of investing in human capital, yes, we can seek to have the position of everyone having a job. But look at the word formal. Latin America needs formal employment to make this engine push forward and generate richness. I also want to mention that we still have positions in manpower that are being demanded, and we don't have careers that exist for them. For example, plumbing or internet flow administrator, content administrator. That didn't exist. Now, the important thing is for you to develop the capacity in the young ones in order for them to learn different things, things that they're not going to learn from teachers or from parents, or they're not going to be able to go to a training course in an institution for that. And when we break the schemes of the traditional education systems and we promote the capacity of cooperation, innovation, and questioning, asking the right questions. In Latin America, we're very obedient. What the teacher says, then that's what it is. And so when we actually have this new scenario, we're going to have a society that is focused on knowledge and innovation. Thank you very much. Pardon me because I actually skipped Claudia Vernon.
Let me just go for a second with Claudia. Claudia is the Director for Social Innovation and President of Belcorp. Belcorp is a company that, through direct marketing, through direct sales, sells beauty products, productos de belleza. So I founded that company. She's called Belmont, and Belcorp, belleza. So it was in the name. It was in the name. I can see. But you do it with. So you have a massive labor force of direct employees, about 15,000, I understand. But you have hundreds of thousands of women that are selling door-to-door your products. So for you, the management of human resources must be the core of your business. So why don't you share with us, what does it mean to manage talent in Latin America and manage female talent in Latin America?
Muchas gracias.
Belcorp in reality feels that their strength is their people, and to invest in to develop the capacity of their people. We have this development. We have questioning every year with new collaborators with the development, and that means the success of Belcorp, and how are they ready, how do they feel that they have a space where they can develop themselves and to grow on a personal basis and professional basis. And through the years, we have over 90% that is shown in the last years. We have been gaining replacing to work in Latin America and on individual basis. In Belcorp, we have more than 10,000 people that we have the administrative, we have the sales force and operators. And we manufacture our own products. In the administrative part, we have 2 years ago, the university, corporate university, Belcorp, that in reality, more than to be a school and innovation and the capacities and training and give marketing courses, what we focus mostly is the leadership and culture. For us, the most important in a collaborator is that their values are similar to the company. It goes hand by hand, as we were saying, that an employee feels that we are concerned about their well-being, and that in reality that is the most important for Belcorp. And in reality, we focus in that leadership company, and in 15 countries that we are. For the sales force, We have more than 2,000 women that are in charge of that million women that sell our products, and it is due to them that we are developing them, and we have a sales school that we put into practice in the 15 countries, and we get together 3 times a year in order to promote what are the best sales practices. And we also have, in reality, a very innovative method. And to certify them, and the operators, we have about 1,600 operators that where 60% are women. For us, it is very important to develop those women and to create we created a program that is an internal beauty where we have topics that go beyond the day-to-day operations. They said they're very domestic violence, and we also touch family problems, and we are very concerned about their well-being. And the consulting group, that there are more than 1 million women that thank you to Belcorp, that they have their own business, and due to the beauty products, they get an income. And today, thank you to internet, we can reach, at least we hope, to train all these people, and we have a platform that we are developing to 300,000, and we are concerned about their personal development of those women, and we do that day to day, and so that they can be motivated, that they are concerned, and we also have psychological services, and through the internet and digitally, we really hope to reach them. And lastly, we have a foundation that is also focuses in provide technical help to the girls of our consulting women group. And lastly, we have a program that is called Great Women and Alliances with universities in different countries to develop a course of 3 months where our consulting group could take that course for 3 months, and we talk about self-esteem, about training and sales, and there are 18,400 graduated in the 15 countries that we are. Thank you very much.
There's a question for Mr. Ribeiro. In 2006, I was asked by the South African government to lead a team of Harvard and MIT professors that would help them with their economic policy strategy. And we took a picture of the team with a cabinet and President Thabo Mbeki at the time. And when I saw the picture, I realized of all the Harvard and MIT team, there wasn't one professor who was born in the United States of America. There was not one. And that led me to think that Harvard and MIT think that you cannot create an excellent institution with a talent that is born in a country of 300+ million people, that they need to source themselves globally. Now, Monica said that the country in Latin America that has the toughest time filling vacancies is Brazil. And, you know, right now you have an economic catastrophe in Portugal and in Spain and so on. There's plenty of talent in the world that are looking for jobs. Is it too controversial for Latin America to think that a very aggressive immigration policy is a way to solve the talent and the skills constraint? Are we shooting ourselves in the foot by restricting and regulating immigration and the number of foreign-born that companies can have?
I don't think so. The point is that this should be this should be looked, as you're mentioning right now, as a long-term strategy, as a structural alignment between countries. We have had this discussion before in many different supply chains in Brazil. And for many of them, the level of flexibility is very strong. But some of those, the risk provided not by the government. This was in deep research and in alignment with the local private sector in Brazil. The risk was that a systemic competitiveness would be put, somehow at risk. I would mention, for example, engineering. So I'm a civil engineer. And in that sense, what we were looking for, and the countries mentioned are some of the traditional partners from Brazil, like Portugal and Spain, was that we had the reciprocity guaranteed in the long term also for Brazilian civil engineers also to provide services when needed to those countries. This was not on the table at that time. There was no condition for them to accept that. Nevertheless, foreign companies are operating, in a free environment in Brazil. We were in charge of transforming even the regulations for Brazil, for companies to operate in Brazil. And in Brazil, we have foreign companies registered in the country with equal conditions to Brazilian originated companies. So there's no difference between both of them. And including, for example, engineering, we have many major companies, both from Portugal and Spain, operating in Brazil. So regarding professional certification recognition from one country to the other, there are these kinds of still misunderstanding between the countries, which should be taken, in my personal opinion, the approach should be in a long term, not in a short term, just to solve this or that specific opportunities or crisis in some places. Brazil, similar to all the Latin American countries, Brazil was formed, our culture was formed through immigration. America was like that. So there's no reason for us to neglect this history that we have. We only must take care of all the professional developments that we have achieved up to today. If it's both ways, it's good for us. Just to cite another example, right now, even with an initial, I would say, unalignment with the local professionals, we decided to import, I would say like that, on the services trade nomenclature, to import the talent from foreign doctors to Brazil. So thousands and thousands of doctors are coming to Brazil from 40 different countries, despite what the media says sometimes, which is basically from Cuba. That's not true. They're coming from, including Spain and Portugal. They're coming from everywhere to help us, achieve better healthcare in the Brazilian system. So, I mean, it's a case by case, and if it's on a long-term approach, then we're happy to partner with other countries.
Thank you very much. Javier, let me ask you, you mentioned in your first presentation that the Argentines abroad sometimes perform very well, but they have trouble performing well in the country because of skills in other parts of the society. But let me ask you about the migration question. Your group is a multinational group, and you have to operate in different countries and in different environments. How different do you find the different environments in terms of the skills requirement, and how easy it is for you to source those skills needs globally?
A ver.
We are in many countries. We are in Argentina, Brazil, We have the project of the train. We are also in Italy and Armenia. In some cases, basically, we work with experts that have worked appropriately in the country or in certain business areas, and the strategic aspects are worked by those that have had good performance. And on the other hand, some tasks are outsourced. So you have a mix. There are some tasks that are very, very strategic, and perhaps you keep those within your core group. Those are the people that understand how the business works, and they're the ones that set the business in different locations. And so it's almost like you're exporting the model, and then some tasks that are not strategic ones, then you can outsource them or hire them. And in some cases, in the interaction, you develop important partnerships, and the partners also support, because we don't go by ourselves in every location. In a lot of occasions, we develop partnerships with local companies, and that allows you to multiply talent. So you have an advantage in a scale, an economy of scale, but also in scope. So you have a synergy. And you take your experience as well as the local people and you put it together and you get to a new level of knowledge that allows you to generate more productivity and therefore better results.
Peter, Mercer is an MMC is a global company. And you're looking at overall management of all aspects of human resources in many, many different dimensions. You have many customers in Latin America. How are your Latin American customers different from your customers elsewhere? What are the headaches that they have that others don't have? And what are the blessings that they are not even aware that they have?
Thank you, Ricardo. We are in about 130 countries around the world, and so it's a fascinating management challenge to try to adjust the HR practices based on whether you're in Africa, the Middle East, Asia, or Latin America. Just a couple of quick examples, because I think Monica and Claudia were quite articulate in talking about the skills gap and how you can do some training within the workplace to try to build those skills up. So for example, in Saudi Arabia, there's something called Saudiization. The Saudi government very much wants a company like ours to hire a greater percentage of Saudi nationals. At the same time, the population base doesn't necessarily have the skills that we need in our employment. So we've started something called the Marsh Academy within Saudi Arabia, where people will come to us at the age of 18 years old, typically, not going to college, Monica, and spend 18 months with us at very, very low pay, but learning basically the skills of what in this case, the insurance business actually occurs. And the government's been very supportive of that because they think that that helps solve an issue for them. In China, we've done something very similar, again, an 18-month program. Humberto, if you'll indulge me to give a quick story about Brazil, the labor laws in Brazil, for abundantly good reasons, are pretty strong, pretty protective of the workforce because the government is trying to do right by the people in Brazil, which is perfectly appropriate. When we try to have dialogues, however, Ricardo, about bringing people on at a very low wage rate and not necessarily giving them all the benefits that a full-time employee who has perhaps a college degree has, it's a little bit more challenging in some areas, including in Brazil.
Okay. Thank you. Monica, you told us what you do for your labor force, for your workforce, but you didn't tell us exactly how would you rate the quality of the workforce before you start improving their skills. How would you say is, what is, in your experience, how appropriate is the set of skills and learnings that people have when you hire them before you improve them? I meant Claudia, sorry.
Oh.
I meant Claudia. I was looking at Claudia.
Okay. You were talking about what happened with him?
Claudia is exhibiting tremendous patience here, Ricardo.
It's okay. Well, what it's required for us, at least in Belcorp, the basic that we look for, and from there we can start working, is passion. I think that without passion, it's very hard to train, to motivate, and at least what I found in Latin America, and especially with women, because for us, we have 74% of our workforce is women. There's a lot of passion and willing to learn, to work, to put so much effort into making things possible. And if we go to capabilities, I do think there is a gap, and we've heard it throughout our panelists, that definitely education in most of the countries that we're in, it's not up to par to education around the world. And what we're trying to do with Universidad Belcorp that we've is together with universities in Latin America, try to teach and bring training experience into Belcorp. But definitely if you start with what we call la materia prima, that people really want to do good and try to learn and are motivated to keep learning and to develop, I think from there you have a lot to work with.
Thank you very much. Well, with that, I'm going to open it up for the audience to have some questions. If you don't raise your hand quickly, I'll ask my own question. So yes, please, in front here. Can you briefly just state your name and where you come from?
My name is Patricia Moore. I'm with American Airlines Nexus Magazine. And my question goes for Monica Flores, because you first opened talking about the salary.
The what?
The salary, how you pay your employees. Can you please explain to us, of those people that you cannot find, has that something to do with the salaries that you're offering to them?
Okay. So we'll answer later when we have a final session. So we'll collect some questions and then we'll go out. So remember the question, okay? Other question from the audience, right in front here, there. Sir? Okay, back there? Okay, good. Okay.
A question for the Brazilian representative, Mr. Ribeiro.
Que se tem producido no Brasil con os médicos cubanos. Então, eu gostaria que você respondesse o que pensa de o facto já absolutamente comprobado e confirmado que estes médicos têm retido un 70% do seu salario pelo goberno brasileiro, incumprindo frontalmente un preceito constitucional brasileiro de que para as mesmas tarefas e os mesmos traballos as persoas deben recibir o mesmo salario. E tamén somente unha coisa, tamén gostaría de saber a súa opinión sobre a medida provisoria que o lobby da Luisa Trajano quere introducir para a Copa do Mundo, para agora no Brasil, onde parece que quere introducir unha medida para que os traballadores posan ter contratos de até 14 días sen cartera asinada, voltando para o que sería o século XIX previo á lei áurea no Brasil. Obrigado.
Okay, muchas gracias. Aquí adelante. Sí.
Ricardo, you gave the example of Harvard and MIT sourcing from much beyond. Everyone is, of course, in favor of innovation and entrepreneurship. No one's going to be against it. But what are the soft skills and the policies that would allow countries, Chile has done some of this, to actually be places where you could convene even beyond the identified needs now and actually be complementary. And if any of you have actually worked on that, of thinking how you bring entrepreneurship and innovation, pulling broader than Latin America.
Okay. There's a question back there.
Hi, I'm Gina Bedenok. I'm a young global leader, and I wanted to ask all of you if you've thought about the way the recruitment system is working now. Are you asking the right questions to find the talent?
Mm-hmm. Very good. We have chance for one more question here, up front here, from India. Okay.
Mr. Hausman, you talked about the immigration of talent, and you spoke about the fact that Brazil can bring talent, easily. One of the questions I had is, across Latin America, if you look at the talent pool, especially for knowledge services, you don't have to import people, but you can actually export work. But Brazil, I don't know what Brazil is doing about it, but obviously has a huge import tax if you actually source services outside Brazil. Now, if you look at, therefore, the largest opportunity that exists today, just like US has outsourced to India and to Philippines and what have you, what are we doing about, across Latin American countries, look at the knowledge services space, look at what talent exists, and how do you, therefore, leverage talent where they are and create employment for them, for the countries which require it, or the businesses that require it, wherever they are located?
Thank you very much. We now have 5 minutes left, and we have 5 people in the panel, so I'm going to ask for 1-minute interventions where you are free to answer the question that was asked to you, or, the ones that are too difficult, you don't. So I'll start with Monica.
I'll do my best. No tiene que ver necesariamente con...
It doesn't necessarily have to do with the salary. We offer market salaries. It's more expensive to have an opening and that you cannot fill instead of not paying a salary. Now, recruitment. Before, you used to ask, what did you study? What are your plans in the next 5 years? Now you have to look in the social media what reputation they have, what contents they have created for the social media, their results in previous experiences, and if they have professional practices. And so it's a lot harder to find an appropriate candidate with the soft skills that are required, because not all of the evaluations are perfect. And now, not only are you interviewing the candidate is also interviewing you. And they're also researching you in the social media, what you said, if you're congruent, if you have social corporate responsibility, if the CEO is congruent between what they do and what they say, and looking for transparency. I just want to close with the topic of this panel. The topic is to invest in human capital, and it's good for us to speak about education and to think about the youth, but for us to create substantial leadership change and to train the next generation leaders, we have to invest in our own training, because we are not understanding how to speak to the youth and to teach them what they need to know in order to be able to generate an important talent strategy.
Okay. Well, first, regarding the doctors from Cuba, I'm not the expert on that topic. It's not my duty at the government, but what I know is that, as far as I know, is that the program in Brazil defines specific conditions that each and every country of origin from the professionals, they have the same total cost for the Brazilian government. And the Brazilian government does not retain any part of that. In case of Cuba, I think there's another institution related to the global health structure that hosts that payment for Cuba based on Cuban government requirement. This is not a Brazilian government requirement at all. But of course, we're hosting our Cuban brothers, and I mean, they're being treated in Brazil as far as we can. Brazilian people are hosting them as friends and as dear friends. The second part of your question, yes? Okay, regarding the retail, yeah. So these are ideas, they come across us every day. We have over almost 600 Congress people in Brazil. So ideas come through the Congress of the country, representing the people of the country every day. When they report something related to retail, final services, services overall, they will address this to our ministry. So we're going to analyze that to our technical extent. The point is that what we're really discussing with the retail companies from the country is how to modernize our labor requirements to become a little bit more flexible for non-traditional working hours. Because in Brazil, we mentioned that it's horário comercial is the local translation for working hours. But for the retail services, working hours does not mean from 8 to 12, from 2 to 6, Monday to Friday. We go to bars and restaurants, we go to shopping malls, to supermarkets, out of that so-called working hours. So some kind of special attention to those services that are providing services to us as citizens on a day-to-day life, this should be addressed, in my point of view, as soon as we can. Regarding offshoring, our friend, which country are you from, sir? India, okay. We'll be hosting the BRICS. Presidenta Dilma is this year, she is the head of the BRICS meeting, and we're hosting the BRICS meeting this July in Fortaleza City in Brazil. We're very happy to host all the delegations to Brazil. But the point regarding exporting services is on my direct interest also in the country. So in Brazil, the tradition is to have agriculture policy and manufacturing policy. I'm sorry for the time, but I'm close this very soon. And manufacturing policies. What we have changed structurally with Plano Brasil Maior is that we now have also the services policy in Brazil. So before that, the incentives to import services are even higher than to export services from Brazil. So this prevented the country from becoming an offshore platform. I don't know which company or institution you come from, but you may be acquainted to that in Brazil. So right now we're in the middle of this transformation. This initial structure for services exports from Brazil and the relationship to other export platforms of services was presented to WTO this last September, and India was one of the countries that we have a structured relationship from that point on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, our time is up. I would like to summarize by saying that Latin America, as we started saying, has a great opportunity. It's had it for a while. It hasn't done as much as it could have. There are many issues on the table. Peter Beshar mentioned the idea that training people in company is a great way of addressing labor force issues. Our current labor laws don't facilitate it. We don't need necessarily to change the labor laws. We may need to subsidize that training by compensating for these extra costs that the labor law generates. I think that there's excellent opportunities in migration that we are not seizing. We have a very cumbersome process of immigration into Latin America. Go to a university and ask what percentage of the professors are foreign-born, and you'll see how small that percentage is. And that's because we are not trying to source ourselves globally in that area. And that's just one example because it's my area. We have done a lot, and we're doing a lot with education, but education is a solution for the next generation. There are plenty of people who are too old to be in school and who have many, many years of labor ahead of them, and there's a lot we can do in that respect with training, and we don't have world-class efforts on the training front, and we don't incorporate the corporate sector enough in that training effort, and with the right fiscal incentives to see the business community as a partner in the generation of jobs. So with that, I would like to close our session, thank the panelists with a great applause, and let's move on. Thank you very much.